don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that anytime we upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thank you.
Hallelujah. Giving praise and honor to Yahuwah our God and thanking him for our lives and the ability to be here this day to worship before him. You may be seated. We thank Yahuwah God for all that he does for us and blessing us and giving us knowledge, wisdom, and understanding and showing us the way that we should walk before him. And we ask that he would continue to bless us and continue to show us that righteous path so that we may always learn to do what is good and right in his sight. For he is the creator of the heavens and the earth, and we understand that besides him there is no other God, no other king, and no other savior. We call upon Yahuwah God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, and thanking him for allowing us to open up his word day by day to obtain knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. And we ask once again that his presence will be with us even on this day, that as we open up the book that contains his words, that we will read at this time, that he would instruct us in that righteous path that we should walk before him. We thank him once again for providing us with food, shelter, and clothing. Even during this week, we thank the Most High for allowing Yisrael to even have fun during this week. You know, even in a time where people are hungry, and Israel was able to have a food competition between men and women and have a competition using food while people are hungry. So think about that. Like, think about what's happening in the world today and how the Most High has protected us. We're competing with food while people are hungry. So imagine think about how blessed the Most High God has made us. That there's a lot of things happening in the world, but he's allowing Yisrael to still come together, still do things together, even though some things may be virtually, but he's allowing Yisrael to come together and be protected during this time while this country and while this world is in turmoil and doesn't know where anything could be day by day, but yet he protects us, allows us to go to work. You know, we were just speaking that even while people have lost jobs, and then there's people that have jobs, but the people that have lost jobs have probably never had a job are making more money than people that have jobs even during this time. So the Most High God is shielding Yisrael during this time. And we have to take advantage of that shield. We have to take advantage of the protection that we are receiving during this time and make sure that we're living righteously before the Most High. Because also this protection is giving us an opportunity to return to God. So it's not that he's just protecting us and blessing us just because he feels like it, but we also consider that we have an opportunity to return during this time because that protection can be taken away at any moment. So we have to enjoy that protection, and in order to keep that protection, we have to be obedient to the words of the Most High. That's it. So at this time, we're going to go into the book of Jeremiah. We're continuing throughout the book of Jeremiah this time. We're going to start at this time in Jeremiah chapter 10, and we're going to hear what Yahuwah God is teaching to the children of Israel. So remember that the prophet Jeremiah, his name is pronounced Yirmiyahu in Hebrew, that he was raised up from Yahuwah God as from young in order to speak the words of God to people that were strong. He sent them to kings, he sent them to prophets, he sent them to princes. So Jeremiah was a young, we don't know his exact age, but Jeremiah acknowledged himself as being young, and God told him, don't say that you're young, but just fortify yourself. He's telling Jeremiah to fortify himself with the words that Yahuwah God is speaking to him directly. So even though Jeremiah is not alive this day, we know that Yahuwah God is alive this day. Amen. So he never dies, so his word never dies. So as we read these words, we ask that Yahuwah God will also fortify us and strengthen us with his word so we may know how to move forward in our lives. So we will know what to do as well as learn what not to do. And we're going to read today a lot of what we should not be doing. So this is the path that Yahuwah God has directed us away from. So once again, thanking Yahuwah God for our lives, strength, and good health. And once again, as the reader is reading, for those that don't know, when you see the word or the two words, the Lord, that is where the name of the creator of the heavens and the earth is in the Hebrew text, which is the original language of most of the Holy Scriptures. There are going to be some portions in the Holy Scriptures that are written in Aramaic. We'll get into that even in this as we read today. But Yahuwah is the name of God. Right. as we pronounce it here. So that would take away any confusion of who we're worshiping versus who those in the world are worshiping. So once again, we are in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 10.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Hear ye the words which Yahuwah speaks unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith Yahuwah, learn not the ways of the nation, and be not dismayed at the sign of the heaven. For the nations are dismayed at them. For the customs of the people are vanity. For it is but a tree which one cutteth out of the forest, the work of the hand of the workman with an axe. They deck it with silver and with gold. They fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it moves not. They are like a pillar in a garden of cucumbers, and speak not. They must needs be born, because they cannot go. Be not afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither is it in them to do good.
So we know, and especially as we read this morning, when it came to the life of Abraham, our father, whose name was changed to Abraham from Abram, that he was also, Abraham, our father, was also given that covenant that we are also supposed to be living by today. So Yahuwah God has made the nation of Israel to be a separate nation from all of the nations upon the face of the earth. So Yahuwah is telling Jeremiah to speak to the people and telling us. So once again, even though Jeremiah is not alive this day, the words of God are still in effect today. So he's telling Jeremiah, do not learn the ways of the nations. So the ways that the nations are doing, even in the country that we're living in, or the country that we are living in, if we understand that we are the children of Yisrael, we're not supposed to be learning the ways or the customs of these nations. The customs and the ways that we're supposed to be following are supposed to be strictly of those of the children of Israel given to us by the God that created the heavens and the earth. So he's teaching us to say we should not learn the ways of the nations and be not dismayed at the signs of the heavens. For he's telling us that the nations are dismayed at the signs of the heavens. So that's why we teach that we don't get into astrology. Because the nations being dismayed doesn't mean that they're afraid. Dismay doesn't mean being afraid, but they look to the heavens for signs. So being the children of Israel, we should not be looking to the heavens for signs, because God is already telling us that that's what the nations do. And the nations are wrong for doing so, but he's teaching us that we're not supposed to be following them. They are supposed to be following us. And them following us, they will be following us in our ways of following Yahuwah God. And then he continues to say that as the nations are dismayed at the signs of the heavens, and once again, they're worshiping the signs of the heavens, the inter-astrology. We spoke about that a few weeks ago, about the astrology that came out of Babylon and even out of Assyria in that region, and the religion that was practiced during that time that led into astrology and them following the signs of the heavens and the constellations, and them deifying constellations and utilizing the constellations in order to give them signs and or to give them direction in their life. But even back in the book of Deuteronomy, God told us not to follow the signs of the heavens, because he also said there that the nations, they follow that. But we are supposed to listen directly to the word of God. So when it comes to knowing what we should do day by day and what's going to happen in the future, God already tells us that. So we are the ones that are supposed to follow God. And he goes on to say that their customs are vain, for they cut down trees. Now, many people use this as a reference to the Christmas tree, but it's talking specifically about the nations cutting down trees to make idol gods to worship, because they cut down the trees. They carve out the trees into images of a man or the images of a woman. During this time, there was a high-end worship of the Asherah service during the time of Jeremiah, where even today, through archaeology, people are digging up things that says Yahuwah and his wife Asherah.
Whoa.
Because Israel was coupling Yahuwah God with Asherah and acting as though Yahuwah God, who created all things, has a wife that he needed to copulate with in order to bring about humanity. So that's why throughout the book of Jeremiah, when we get to reading about the queen of the heavens, that is the Asherah, that Israel. So when we look back in our history, because a lot of people go back in our history, they go back and read in the scripture, everything that we did was not right. So we can't read certain things in scripture and think because Israel did it that it makes it right. Because if everything Israel did was right, we wouldn't be sitting here in Brooklyn, New York, or in Chicago, or in Los Angeles, or in somewhere in England, or somewhere in Zimbabwe, if we could read everything and say, well, this is what Israel did in the Holy Scripture, so we must be able to do that. God is condemning Israel for the things that were being done. So they were cutting down trees and decking them trees with silver, putting ornaments on those idols. But God is saying that those idols cannot speak. You can talk to those idols all day long, but they cannot speak. You dress it up with the silver and the gold, but all you did was dress up something that has no power. You built that, or somebody you paid built that. So you actually have more power over what was made. Continue.
There is none like unto thee, O Yahuwah. Thou art great. Thy name is great and mighty. Who would not fear thee, O Yahuwah, King of the nations? For it benefits thee. For as much as all the wise men of the nations, and in all their royalty, there is none like unto thee. But they are altogether brutish and foolish. The vanities by which they are instructed are but a stock.
So the stock could just mean like a stock of wood. So once again, Israel has gotten into the frame of mind of thinking that other gods can do something for them. So that's why God is saying back in the verse, he says that neither is it in them to do good. Because those idols that people build cannot do any good or do any evil. They can't protect you. They can't give you any good luck, as people may call it today. They can't give you any good fortune. So once again, God is teaching us not to follow those ways or those customs of the nations. Even today, many of us, as we were traveling here and as many travel back home, we're going to see the customs of the nations even on this day. So many of us, it's a good thing we forgot that today was October 31st, but we're going to see about the customs that the nations continue to do today on All Hallows Eve. And once again, these are the things that we are supposed to stay away from. We're supposed to stay away from worshiping spirits. And that's where these customs come from, such as Halloween and dressing up in costumes and doing things like that. Israel is supposed to be separated. We're not supposed to be following those customs in any shape or form. And even beyond that, we're not supposed to be getting into any idolatry in any shape or form. Continue.
Verse 9. Silver beaten into plates, which is brought from Tarshish, and gold from Uphaz, the work of the craftsman and of the hands of the goldsmith. Blue and purple is their clothing. They are all works of skillful men.
So it's talking about, once again, no matter how skillful the artists are in making these idols and making a representation of a human being, and no matter how much, you go far, because it's talking about places that, had the blue and the purple, and places that had the silver and the gold that people would trade for. So it doesn't matter how much money you would spend in order to build that idol and how much you dress it up to make it look good, that idol still cannot do anything for you. And that's what God is saying through the prophet Jeremiah, that those idols, those things that as a nation we worship by following the customs of other nations, they're vain because they cannot do anything for us. Yes, so God is trying to bring us out of that. But even through that process, God is speaking to us in a harsh manner because he's calling us foolish for doing so. He's calling all of those that bow down to idols foolish. We may have compassion today because we know people that are into idolatry, but we also have to recognize how God looks at those acts. And it's our responsibility, as we have changed out of those ways, that it's also our responsibility to help people get out of those ways also. So we know that God is condemning them, but we have to have also that compassion, as God has shown us, that we can have compassion for other people and show them these words. Show them these words that Yahuwah God is speaking and tell them that the idols that they're worshiping cannot do anything for them. Because we serve a God that is unseen, that you cannot make a representation out of. So as the prophet Jeremiah is speaking, as he's receiving the word of God, and God is speaking to him these words, now here's the comparison between the idols and Yahuwah God.
But Yahuwah God is the true God. He is the living God and the everlasting King. At his wrath the earth trembles, and the nations are not able to abide in his indignation.
So that's the difference between the idols and Yahuwah God. Yahuwah God is a true God, while the idols that people worship were invented or made up. There were human beings that were born before idols were made. And that's the difference. So God is showing us that he was here before all creation. But we are worshiping things that we made with our own hands. So that's the mindset that Yahuwah God is trying to get us out of. That we have to realize that the things that we do are vain. That once and the idols are the physical representations of gods and goddesses that people worship. But anything that we put before Yahuwah God is a vain thing. Right. Because we have to realize that everything that we receive comes from Yahuwah God. And we can't give credit or praise to anyone else besides him. Continue.
11. Thus shall ye say unto them, the gods that have not made the heavens and the earth, these shall perish from the earth and from under the heavens.
So that line there that was spoken by God through Jeremiah to speak to the people, that's one of the lines that in the book of Jeremiah was written in the Aramaic language. The rest of the chapter is written in Hebrew, but that one line was written in Aramaic. because the Babylonians, whom God is sending to take Israel into captivity, have to understand this. That it's not their own power that is causing them to take Israel into captivity. Also, the Israelites that are in Babylon, as you know, you heard some called speak about, there were waves of the captivity from Judah going into Babylon. So the Israelites that are in Babylon that read or understand the Aramaic language, when they read this, they will also learn that the gods that have not made the heavens and the earth, these shall perish from the earth and from under the heavens. Because Yahuwah God created the heavens and the earth. So anything that you could consider that is a god came after Yahuwah God created the heavens and the earth. And those gods and those goddesses will perish. So if you think about who you worship, if the God that you worship and you read a book about your God, and the book of your God doesn't contain a creation story connected to your God, then that God is going to perish. Because remember, the Holy Scripture, when we go back to the book of Genesis, we talk about Yahuwah, that tetragrammaton for the name, that Yod Hey Waw Hey, which we pronounce here as Yahuwah. And you may hear people pronounce it as Yahweh. He is the creator of the heavens and the earth. So when you read about all these other books and all these other texts, if those gods did not create the heavens and the earth, they will perish from under the heavens and from off of the earth. So that's why you have religions that rise and religions that fall. So we read about mythology today, but when we read about Egyptian mythology, Greek mythology, and Roman mythology, we consider those mythologies, which they are. They were myths back then, but that was the way of life of people back then. They really believed in that. But as God spoke during this time, he said that those gods will perish, and we see today in what they call 2020, those gods have perished. So now the gods that people worship today, that if they can't flip the beginning of their book and read about their God creating the heavens and the earth, then 2,000 years from now, those people back then would not be worshiping the gods that people worship today. Because as God spoke it, those gods that have not made the heavens and the earth, these shall perish from the earth and from under the heavens. So we have to take strength and give praise to God that he has taught us that it was him alone that made everything. Because Yahuwah God would never perish. Gods that people build with their hands, they deteriorate. You know, you build an idol out of wood, anything made out of wood is going to deteriorate. So you might outlive your God. And that's why people have to buy new gods. They buy chains and then they ride on the bike and then the chain gets snatched in a tree and then it cracks and you got to get your God fixed. If you got to fix your God, then there's a problem. You might be riding the bike and then it goes off and then, you ever seen like a car roll over a phone or something like that? You might drop your idol and the cars roll over it and crack it. Then you got to get a replacement God. So if you got to get a replacement God, then the God that you worship is not God. Because Yahuwah God cannot be replaced. He's the first and he's the last, and with him there is none. So once again, as he's saying that those gods will perish. You can't take your God to a pawn shop because you're poor. And you can't go to a pawn shop to buy a God. That means somebody else sold it to get some money. So if gods are getting pawned, then it's a problem. You see like a lot of the rappers and a lot of the entertainers, they have the crucifix and the diamonds and everything today. And then the next album don't sell so well, so now they got to sell that to help pay for the house. So how do you get rid of your God for money? But that was the God that you considered could do you good. But God said earlier in this chapter, the gods you worship cannot do good. So we have to focus our mind on Yahuwah God who can do good, but also realize he does evil. That's right. So when you do evil, Yahuwah God will do evil. Continue.
Well, he that made the earth by his power, that established the world by his wisdom, and have stretched out the heavens by his understanding, at the sound of his giving a multitude of waters in the heaven, and when he causes the vapor to ascend from the ends of the earth, when he makes lightnings with the rain, and brings forth the wind out of his treasuries. Every man is proved to be brutish without knowledge. Every goldsmith is put to shame by the graven image. His molten image is falsehood, and there is no breath in them. They are vanity, a work of delusion. In the time of their visitation, they shall perish.
So once again, going back to those idols, God's saying that those idols will perish. The makers of those idols will be deemed foolish because the people are going to realize, well, what are you making for me? Because what you made for me was not able to do anything for me. I should have saved my money and bought a house. I should have saved my money and put some gas in the car because I spent my money and gave it to you to fashion a God, and still I'm in the same predicament as I was in before. Because you have somebody make a God, but then you pray to that God and nothing changes. But you have to pray to the one that does not change. The one that is the first and is last and is always the same. The one that can do good as well as evil. The one that once people worship or give credit unto him, which we talk about Yahuwah, as it said in the conclusion of chapter 9, that's who the rich person should glory in. That's who the strong person should glory in. Because we should glory in knowing that Yahuwah is God and that he's the one that does righteousness, that he loves righteousness, he loves justice, and he's the one that would give us peace. But all of those idols that we are into, we have to get out of that. And we have to show people through chapters such as this that they are foolish for worshiping those idols. Now those words sound harsh today, and they were harsh back then, but that's how Yahuwah God is considering these things. And we have to get our minds out of worshiping things that cannot do anything for us. For God, as it said here, God speaks and waters move.
Right.
You know, we don't realize how many things are happening in 2020. That we know about the coronavirus. We know about the deaths that are happening. This is like one of the worst hurricane seasons also that ever happened. Because there's so many things happening in the world that we don't realize that they went through the alphabet almost twice now. That's how many hurricanes have been passing. That storm that just passed 2 days ago was a hurricane that passed through the southern of the U.S. early this week, originally passing through the islands through Mexico, and then originally hit New York. God speaks and things happen. Power's been going out once again. This is one of the worst hurricane seasons ever, but it's overshadowed by the pandemic as well. So many things are happening this year. But even through all of that, Yahuwah God is allowing Yisrael to still be safe and to still prosper. So while we have that time to be safe and prosper, we have to take advantage of that opportunity and worship the true and the living God. Continue.
Verse 16. Not like these is the portion of Yahuwah, for he is the former of all things, and Israel is the tribe of his inheritance. Yahuwah of hosts is his name.
So we talked about the God that said earlier that when he causes the vapors to ascend from the ends of the earth, when he makes lightnings with the rain and brings forth the wind out of his treasuries, the God that does all of these things earlier says that has established the world by his wisdom and have stretched out the heavens by his understanding. Yahuwah God that has done all these things still considers Israel his inheritance. The same one that speaks and things happening in the universe still considers Israel his inheritance. Yahuwah God is in control of all things, but he still considers Yisrael out of everything. Once again, sending hurricanes all the time, and he has the power to cause the seas to go over the banks and everything, but he still considers Yisrael. So as it says, for he's the form of all things, so we know Yahuwah God makes all things, and Yisrael is the tribe of his inheritance. So that's how much he considers us in all of the things that he has created. He has control over everything, but yet he still considers us and wants us to do the right thing so that he doesn't sweep us up along with all of creation. Continue.
17. Gather up thy wares from the ground, O thou that abidest in the siege. For thus saith Yahuwah, behold, I will sling out the inhabitants of the land at this time, and I will distress them that they may feel it.
So that's once again, we know God does good and he does evil. So as you speak in all of these things and trying to warn us, there is a siege happening in the territory of Judah. So God is saying that gather yourself, gather your stuff together because you're getting swept in that siege. So hopefully when you get sieged by the Babylonians and they come into the city and they take you into captivity, hopefully you'll be able to take some of your wares with you. So he's just saying, pack your bags. Basically, that's what it's saying when it says gather your wares. He's just saying, pack your bags. Because that's how upset God is with the nation of Israel at this time. Because he's telling us to pack our bags because we're going into captivity. But he has destroyed other nations. We're going to read about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah in a few weeks from now. And with all the destruction of the various nations, he still keeps Israel alive. So we have to consider once again how blessed we are that he just tells us pack our bags just to go on a quick trip. And he's telling us we're going to return from that trip. But there were many nations that went on the trip and never came back. They gathered their stuff and never got back to their original place. But God has given us an opportunity and hoping that even in captivity, we would consider him and return to him so that we can return from this vacation that we're in. Continue.
19. Woe is me for my hurt. My wound is grievous. But I said, this is but a sickness, and I must bear it. My tent is spoiled, and all my cords are broken. My children are going forth of me, and they are not. There is none to stretch forth my tent any more, and to set up my curtains. For the shepherds are become brutish, and have not inquired of Yahuwah. Therefore they have not prospered, and all their flocks are scattered. Hark, a report. Behold, it comes in a great commotion out of the north country to make the cities of Yehuda desolate and a dwelling place of jackals.
Because when Babylon, who is coming from the north, comes into Judah to completely take it out, Judah, out of that territory of Judah is going to be left desolate. So we know that people got swept up and got taken to the north to Babylon, and then some people left out of Judah to go south and to dwell into Egypt because people wanted to run from the judgment of God. But earlier, as it said, and the prophet is just speaking in terms of Yisrael, he said, but I said, this is but a sickness, and I must bear it.
Right.
When we get sick, we just have to weather that storm, like they say, and just go through it. It's going to be painful. It's going to be aggravating, but we know that through sickness, there is health. So we just have to pray to God that he would take us out of this sickness. And we also have the sickness of today of the mind, that we want to pray that Yahuwah God takes all of us out of the sickness of our mind. We have to bear it at this time. But just because we are here today, or those are watching online, our people are still living in this mental sickness. So we have to pray that all of us get taken out of this mental sickness. We can't just think about ourselves and think that Yahuwah God has taught us who he is and neglect those whom he has not taught yet, or whose eyes he has not opened yet, or whose ears he has not opened yet. We have to have compassion for their sickness as well. Just like when we're sick physically and we like when people take care of us, we see how people are sick. It's time for us to bring them that medicine also. And it's not going to taste good. Just like when you're sick and somebody might give you that black seed oil or that cerasea, and that cerasea goes through your body, and you know what happens after it goes through your body. You don't like it when you drink it. You don't like what happens when it goes through your body. But you got to bear that sickness. So it's the same way we got to bring that healing to the people. They're not going to like the taste of it. They're not going to like what happens when it goes through their body. But once it completes its task and they're clear and they're healed, they're going to love you for it. Because they're going to love the fact that God sent you to speak to them, to give them that medicine. So once again, this is a sickness that we have to bear, but it's a sickness that we can't be healed from. So we have to thank God for giving us the healing word to give our people so that we can bear and go through the sickness. So continue.
O Yahuwah, I know that man's way is not his own. It is not in man to direct his steps as he walks. O Yah, correct me but in measure, not in thy anger, lest thou diminish me. Pour out thy wrath upon the nations that know thee not, and upon the families that call not upon thy name. For they have devoured Yaakov. Yea, they have devoured him and consumed him, and have laid waste his habitation.
So this is the prayer that Jeremiah is speaking on behalf of the children of Yisrael, that he's asking for correction for Yisrael, because God is angry. Remember, King Josiah was one of the most righteous kings recorded in the Holy Scriptures. But yet God is speaking about how evil Yisrael is, even from the reign of King Josiah up until Israel or the Judah gets swept up in the time of King Zedekiah. So once again, it's not about just what the king does. The people have to be righteous.
Right.
So King Josiah did what he could. He tried to make those sweeping changes in the nation. But if the people aren't willing to follow Yahuwah God, then the people will get swept up by Yahuwah God's anger. So the prophet Jeremiah is saying that he knows that this correction is coming. He knows that Babylon is going to come. God is speaking it over and over again, and there's nothing that's being said that's going to stop God from sending Babylon into Yisrael or into Judah to sweep it away. But the prophet is just saying, just have some compassion while you're doing it. And that's what's happening to us today. We are living in captivity. God is having compassion for us, even during this captivity, because he has not completely destroyed us, but allows this opportunity to still live today. Continue.
The word that came to Yirmiyahu from Yahuwah, saying, hear ye the word of this covenant, and speak to the men of Yehudah and to the inhabitants of Yerushalayim, and say unto them, thus saith Yahuwah Elohei Yisrael.
And so let's pay attention to this once again, because this is the word that Yahuwah is speaking to Jeremiah to speak concerning the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. So this is spoken back then, but once again, the word of God never disappears. So once God has spoken it, it continues to be in effect. And this is what God said.
Cursed be the man that heareth not the words of this covenant, which I command your fathers in the day that I brought them forth out of the land of Egypt, out of the iron furnace, saying, hearken to my voice, and do them, according to all that I command you, so shall ye be my people, and I will be your God, that I may establish the oath which I swore to your fathers, to give them a land flowing with milk and honey, as it is this day. Then answered I and said, Amen, O Yahuwah.
Amen just means so be it. Because once again, there are people out there that say that Amen is related to an Egyptian god, but Amen is a Hebrew word meaning so be it. Just because it sounds phonetically like Egyptian god, it's two different things. But the prophet Jeremiah is saying after God says all this, he's saying, he's saying so be it. It's established. But God says, cursed be the man that does not hear the words of this covenant. The words of the covenant that we're reading in this book, in the Holy Scriptures. The covenant that God made between him and Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. About the circumcision that we read earlier this day. So, cursed be the man that is not circumcised.
Right.
Cursed be the man also that does not keep the Sabbath day, which is part of the covenant.
Right.
Cursed be the man that doesn't eat clean, because we have to make a difference between the clean and the unclean.
That's right.
So there are all of these things that are part of the covenant that we may consider that these people are nice, but God is cursing them for not being in this covenant. So once again, we can't just think about ourselves as being a blessed people because we're in this way, but we have to consider that all of Yisrael is not in this way. So that curse is upon all of us as well. So we have to make sure, once again, we give that medicine to the people, because when God comes to sweep with that broom, everybody could get swept up. Don't think because you're living righteously, you may think you're living righteously, that God is going to have you build that ark so that you can go in like Noah did. You don't have to, you may not be in that same level as Noah. So when that flood waters come, you might be the one outside of the ark and somebody else might be in there. So when that curse comes, you might be swept up in it. So he says, cursed be the man that does not follow the words of this covenant. So we cannot allow anybody to tell us that the covenant of the Old Testament is not in effect today.
Right.
Because God said, cursed be the man that does not follow that covenant. So no one else can change that covenant. So people can't come and say we have a new covenant to live under, when before the new covenant that they speak of came into effect, or not came into effect, the new covenant that they speak of was made up or invented.
Right.
God said, cursed be the man that does not follow this covenant. Continue.
6. And Yahuwah said unto me, proclaim all these words in the cities of Yehudah and in the streets of Yisrael, saying, hear ye the words of this covenant and do them.
So it's not just about listening. We got to do the covenant as well. So once again, circumcision, keeping the Sabbath day holy, eating clean, making a difference between the clean and the unclean. When a person is unclean, they separate themselves until they're clean. All of these words of the covenant that Yahuwah God even is teaching us not to lie, not to be deceitful, to wear the fringes on the four corners of our garments. All of these things are part of the covenant that God has made between him and the children of Yisrael that we have to listen to as well as do them. So there are many people that can read the Holy Scriptures, understand what's being read, but if you're not doing it, then cursed be you. So you can quote out the verses and everything like that because you can listen very well, but you have to hear it and do it. Continue.
For I earnestly forewarned your fathers in the day that I brought them out of the land of Egypt, even unto this day, forewarning them betimes and often, saying, hearken to my voice. Yet they hearken not, nor incline their ear, but walk everyone in the stubbornness of their own evil heart. Therefore I brought upon them all the words of this covenant, which I command them to do, but they did them not.
So when he's talking about all the words of the covenant that he brought upon them, as we came out of Egypt, we were given Leviticus chapter 26. It wasn't given to us as Leviticus chapter 26, but we're speaking it in reference how we can read it today. When we first got into the wilderness or into the desert, God spoke to us the words that we read in Leviticus chapter 26, which is the blessings and the curses, or the rewards and the punishments that come with the covenant. And then at the end of that 40-year journey in the desert, God reiterated Leviticus 26 by reiterating as we read at Deuteronomy 28 with the blessings and the curses. So all of those words are still upon us today. So once again, God does good and he does evil. But he gives good to those that do good and evil to those that do evil. So he said that he still, even though we didn't hear the words of the covenant, he brought the words of the covenant upon us because those were the ones that already were part of the covenant. Continue.
Verse 9. And Yahuwah said unto me, a conspiracy is found among the men of Yehudah and among the inhabitants of Jerusalem. They are turned back to the iniquities of their forefathers, who refuse to hear my words, and they are gone after other gods to serve them. The house of Yisrael and the house of Yehudah have broken my covenant which I made with their fathers. Therefore, thus saith Yahuwah, behold, I will bring an evil upon them which they shall not be able to escape. And though they shall cry unto me, I will not hearken unto them.
So go back, read that verse 11 again.
Therefore, thus saith Yahuwah, behold, I will bring an evil upon them which
So who's bringing the evil upon the people?
Yahuwah.
So we don't read where Satan is bringing evil anywhere in this Holy Scriptures. We don't read where the devil brings evil anywhere in the Holy Scriptures. So it says, once again, read verse 11. Therefore, thus
saith Yahuwah, behold, I bring evil upon them.
He's the one bringing upon us. So once again, we can't think about what the nations have taught us. So it said in the beginning of chapter 10, do not follow the ways of the customs of the nations. They follow those signs of the heavens. They follow those false gods. So we cannot consider what they consider Satan or the devil or the adversary can do to us. God is the one that does good and does evil. Once we take the power of evil away from Yahuwah God, then we're diminishing from what he is able to do. So that we have to understand that Yahuwah is saying that he is the one that is bringing this evil upon the children of Israel, but he's not doing it because he just feels like it. When God is bringing evil, it's because of a reason. Continue.
Which they shall not be able to escape. And though they shall cry unto me, I will not hearken unto them. Then shall the cities of Yehudah and the inhabitants of Yisrael go and cry unto the gods unto whom they offer, but they shall not save them at all in the time of their trouble. For according to the number of thy cities are thy gods, O Yehudah, and according to the number of thy streets, O Jerusalem, have ye set up altars to shameful things, even altars to demons.
So even before we get to the next verse, because Yahuwah God is saying that in the territory of Judah, or the kingdom of Judah, as many cities that were there in that territory, that's how many gods Judah, which was the kingdom that was at that time, was worshiping. As many streets as they were in Jerusalem, that's how many altars people were building to false gods. So imagine on Hamilton Avenue, there's an altar for one god. Then on Lorraine Street, which is around the corner, there's an altar for another god.
Oh.
Then on Court Street, there's an altar for another god. Then on Eastern Parkway, there's an altar for another god. Then on Utica Ave, there's an altar for another god. We got some people from the Bronx here. So from Prospect, Jerome Avenue, there was an altar to a false god there. In Prospect, I think it's Avenue, for 3rd Ave, there was an altar to a false god there. Yankee Stadium, there was an altar to a false god there. Grand Concourse, there was an altar to a false god there. So just put it in today's time. So there might be people that's watching online in Atlanta. So you had a god in Decatur, you had a god in Lithonia, you had a god in Athens. So that's how many gods that people were worshiping. And God was angry. And then once evil came upon us, then we decided to cry out to Yahuwah God. But the response from Yahuwah God is, go cry to the gods that you were worshiping before. That's how angry God is at this point. He's saying that now when things are going bad for you, now you want to look to him for help. What happened to the gods of Utica Avenue that you was worshiping before? Where was that? Where's that God now? The God of Eastern Parkway that you was worshiping before. Where's that God now? That God of 3rd Ave, where's that God now? Tremont Ave, where's that God now? Go back and worship that God or that goddess. Because obviously that was the one that you was decking with the silver and the gold, as we read in chapter 10. The one that you sent afar and got that purple and that scarlet to dress that God up. So the one that you was spending all that money on, now when times are hard, why don't you cry to that same God for help? Maybe he can't hear you now. But God was hearing before, he's hearing now, and he will hear in the future. Continue.
Therefore, pray not thou for this people, neither lift up cry nor prayer for them, for I will not hear them in the time that they cry unto me for their trouble.
So that's how, once again, Lael probably can't read this with the same force God would probably saying that with. Probably none of us can read that verse with the force that Yahuwah God said that with. But when we got to the point where Yahuwah God is saying, do not cry or pray for this people, that's how bad we got. Today we pray for people when they're sick and do things, but this was a point in time, God said he is not hearing any prayers. He said, go back to those gods that you were worshiping before, and I do not want to hear you right now. That's how angry God is at this point, that he's shutting his ears to any prayer and returning back to sender, meaning the gods that we were worshiping before. He's just completely turning away from us and leaving us on our own, because we wanted to be on our own. We wanted to worship these gods and goddesses. So now when things are hard, God is saying, continue to pray to these gods and goddesses. And he's saying he does not want to hear our voice. The prophet Jeremiah, he does not want to hear his voice on our behalf either. Wow. That's how angry God is, or God was at us, that causes us to be on Utica Avenue and on Tremont and on Jerome Avenue and in Lithonia and in Athens today. Because God wasn't hearing any prayers, but hopefully now he's hearing prayers. Hopefully he's listening to us and giving us an opportunity to get out of these avenues and return back to the streets of Jerusalem once again. Continue.
15. What hath my beloved to do in my house? Seeing she have wrought lewdness with many, and the hollow flesh is passed from thee. When thou doest evil, then thou rejoice. Yahuwah called thy name a leafy olive tree, fair with goodly fruit. With the noise of a great tumult, he hath kindled fire upon it, and the branches of it are broken. For Yahuwah of hosts, that planted thee, hath pronounced evil against thee, because of the evil of the house of Yisrael and of the house of Yehudah, which they have brought for themselves and provoked me by offering to demons.
So God is saying that with all of the evil that is being done, why are we going to God's house? So it's not about just going to what we call the temple on the Sabbath day. It's about what we're doing throughout the week before we get to the temple. So as he's saying here, if your actions are lewd throughout the week, his question is, why are you in the house now? You decided to come up in the house now, but you were doing all these things before. So once again, this is the question that God is asking. Do we actually have an answer for that? What happened on Monday that now all of a sudden we think we took a shower before sundown on Friday and we're clean enough to enter into God's house on the Sabbath day? God is saying he doesn't want us in his house if you're doing all lewd acts throughout the week. So you might as well stay out the house. Just like you was out the house all throughout the week, don't enter the house now.
Right.
Because he said he planted us, we're supposed to be all righteous because he planted us in a righteous manner. But we grew up and decided that we wanted to do what we wanted to do. Worship idols and make offerings, as it says here, to the demons or to Baal in all the places of Jerusalem, all throughout Judah. But now when the holy days come, this is when we want to come and spruce ourselves up before God and clean ourselves up in front of other people. But God sees the lewdness of our ways. So that shower on Friday before sundown didn't wash that lewdness away. It just made you ritually clean, but it didn't take away that lewdness that God is still seeing that you did on Tuesday. So God sees all of that, because once again, he sees in the past, he's seeing right now, and he already sees what you're going to do Wednesday. So he's saying, why are you in the house today when he knows? You might not even know it yet. I just said earlier, man doesn't even know his own way.
Right.
But God already knows what you're going to do Wednesday, so he said, why even show up in the house today? Because he already knows what you're going to do on Wednesday. So we have to clean ourselves up. And once we clean ourselves up and return wholeheartedly to God, then God will accept us. Continue.
And Yahuwah gave me knowledge of it, and I knew it. Then thou showed me their doings. But I was like a docile lamb that is led to the slaughter, and I knew not that they had devised devices against me.
So before you continue, just once again, this is now Jeremiah speaking about himself, literally speaking about himself. Because Yahuwah God gave him knowledge of what was happening in Israel. Because once again, as we read in the book, the beginning of the book, he said he was young. So he's a Levite dwelling in the city of Anatot, which is a city in the territory of Binyamin, but that's a Levitical city. So in Anatot is Levites, but once again, it's the Levites and Binyamin in that city, but it's in the territory of Binyamin, but it's a Levitical city. So once again, now he's speaking about, Prophet Jeremiah is speaking about himself, how Yahuwah God caused him to know of what's happening. And Jeremiah himself is appalled at what's happening. But as he's speaking these words to the people, he's saying that he's now as a docile lamb that's led to the slaughter because God is sending him on his mission. But now because he's on his mission, people are angry with him and want to kill him. Continue.
Let us destroy the tree with the fruit thereof.
So this is how they talk about the prophet Jeremiah. Just cut him clean off. Continue.
And let us cut him off from the land of the living, that his name may be no more remembered.
So once again, this is what people are conspiring against the prophet Jeremiah, that they wanted to completely destroy him. Continue.
But Yahuwah Tzebaoth, that judges righteously, that tries the reins of the heart, let me see the vengeance on them. For unto thee have I revealed my cause.
So Jeremiah is praying to God, revealing to God. God already knows, but he's saying he's revealing to God all of these plots that are being made against him. And he's saying that just as they conspired to cut him off, he's praying that Yahuwah God will take vengeance on his behalf against them. Because Jeremiah knows that he doesn't have the power to do it physically. But this is also how we have to consider things. Put all our trust in Yahuwah God. Don't, when somebody makes you angry, don't, if you can do so, if you can restrain yourself, leave it up to the hands of God. Because God can do a better job of being vengeful for you than you ever can. So once again, when things happen in your life and people start doing stuff to you, it's not in your best interest to try to verbally or physically attack those people. There's a judgment that has to be executed when judgment calls for it. But if it's just a cause between you and an individual or you and people, leave it in the hands of God. That's what Jeremiah is doing here. Because he realized also that he's going against the king. He's going against princes. He's going against prophets. So he's asking God to take up the vengeance for him because he's hearing all these conspiracies against him. People want to completely cut him off. But he's asking God to hear his petition and just to take up that vengeance. Because once again, even in Torah, part of the covenant is not to be vengeful against one another. We're supposed to work things out. But we leave any vengeance to the Most High God. Continue.
Therefore, thus saith Yahuwah concerning the men of Anatot.
So once again, that's the city he's dwelling in, that he originally or initially received the commission to be a prophet in that city of Anatot. Once again, it's a Levitical city in among the tribe of Binyamin. Continue.
And that seek thy life, saying, thou shalt not prophesy in the name of Yahuwah, that thou die not by our hand.
Because they wanted to kill him for prophesying in the name of Yahuwah, as opposed to prophesying in the name of the false gods that they were worshiping in all of the streets of Judah. Continue.
Therefore, thus saith Yahuwah Tzebaoth, behold, I will punish them. The young men shall die by the sword, and their sons and daughters shall die by famine.
So Yahuwah God is telling Jeremiah, don't worry about it. You're going to live. Jeremiah's going to live through pain. He's going to live through condemnation of other people. But God is assuring him and saying, just be still. Do what he's commanded to do. And he's going to see the retribution that God is going to put upon all of those that speak against him. Continue.
There shall be no remnant unto them. For I will bring evil upon the men of Anatot, even the year of their visitation.
So, once again, Yahuwah God has given strength to Jeremiah. So once again, even today, we have to develop strength. Know that Yahuwah God would take up our cause. Make your petition to Yahuwah God alone. So don't worry about trying to go back and forth with people. But if you know that you're right, take your petition to God. And if you're right, don't be angry with people and you're wrong. And make a petition to God. If you're right, make a petition to God and let Yahuwah God handle all of that vengeance for you. Because once again, he can do a better job of taking care of people than you ever could. So we thank Yahuwah God for our lives. We thank him for strength, for good health, and being able to call upon his name in this day, and asking that he will continue to gather us, strengthen us, so hopefully we have learned from the words that we read, learn to turn away from vain things, and learn to walk in the path of truth, and to walk in the path of Yahuwah God, who has created the heavens and the earth, and not to walk in the path of the gods who he has already said will perish on the earth and from under the heavens. Hallelujah.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that anytime we upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thank you.